What if I told you that in the heart of London, there once stood a place so terrifying that even hardened criminals begged for death? A prison where disease spread faster than rumors, where children slept beside murderers, where the air itself could kill you. This was not fiction. This was not exaggeration. This was Newgate Prison. And tonight, we walk inside. Before modern prisons, before human rights, before reform. There was Newgate. Built in 1188, rebuilt after fires, expanded in the 1700s. By 1783, it had become a symbol of fear. Located beside the Old Bailey Court in London, Newgate wasn't just a prison. It was a public spectacle. A marketplace of misery. A waiting room for death. Newgate Prison stood like a stone fortress. Thick gray walls. Tiny barred windows. Iron doors that echoed when shut. Inside, it was worse. The prison was divided into sections: men's wards, women's wards, debtors' rooms, condemned cells, but divided did not mean organized. Prisoners were packed together. No separation by crime. No separation by age. A pickpocket could share space with a murderer. A child could sleep beside a violent offender. The air inside was suffocating. There was almost no ventilation. Waste accumulated in corners. The smell of sweat, sickness, and decay never left. Disease thrived here. Typhus, known as jail fever, spread rapidly. In fact, in 1750, a typhus outbreak from Newgate spread to the courtroom, killing judges, lawyers, and officials. Yes, the prison was so toxic, it killed people outside its walls. Food? Prisoners had to buy their own. If you had money, you ate. If you didn't, you starved. Even bedding wasn't free. You paid for straw. If you couldn't pay, you slept on stone. Jailers were not paid proper salaries. So they charged fees for everything. Unlocking chains, bringing food, removing irons, even for release. Freedom itself had a price. Newgate was not just a prison. It was the final stop before execution. Most prisoners awaited trial at the Old Bailey. If convicted of serious crimes, they were sent back to Newgate to wait for death. Execution day was public entertainment. Crowds gathered outside. Vendors sold food and alcohol. Children watched. The condemned were transported in open carts from Newgate to Tyburn before 1783 and later executed outside Newgate itself. Some prisoners spent weeks in the condemned hold. A dark underground cell. Chained. Waiting. The psychological torture was immense. Some prayed. Some screamed. Some went mad. And yet, crowds treated it like a festival. Executions were meant as warnings. Instead, they became spectacles. Inside Newgate, justice depended on wealth. If you were poor, you suffered. If you had money, you could buy comfort. Wealthy prisoners rented private rooms. They had beds, furniture, better food. Some even entertained guests. Meanwhile, the poor rotted in communal wards. Debtors suffered differently. Many weren't criminals. They simply owed money. Yet they were locked inside until someone paid their debt. Families sometimes moved inside with them. Children grew up behind prison walls. Corruption was normal. Turnkeys demanded bribes. Guards ignored violence for a fee. Prisoners created their own hierarchies. The strong controlled the weak. Survival meant alliances or submission. Newgate wasn't just a prison. It was a miniature society, built on fear, money, power, and despair. By the late 1700s, reformers began exposing the horrors. Investigations revealed overcrowding, disease, abuse. Eventually, public opinion began to shift. Newgate would later be rebuilt, reformed, and finally demolished in 1904. But in 1783, it was London's hell on earth, and as the iron gates closed each night, the screams echoed through stone corridors. In Newgate, punishment was not about justice. It was about suffering. And for many, death was not the worst fate. Living inside Newgate was. And when the iron gates closed each night, London slept. Carriages rolled through cobbled streets. Gas lamps flickered softly in the fog. Merchants counted their profits. Families gathered by warm fireplaces. But inside Newgate, there was no warmth, no comfort, no certainty of tomorrow. Only stone, only iron, only the sound of coughing in the dark. Some prisoners were guilty. Some were desperate. Some were simply poor. And some were children born into the wrong circumstances. Newgate did not ask who you were. It asked what you could pay. If you had money, you survived differently. If you did not, you disappeared quietly into the crowd of the forgotten. History often remembers kings. It remembers wars. It remembers victories. But places like Newgate remind us of something else. They remind us how a society treats its weakest. In 1783, Newgate stood as a symbol, not only of crime, but of inequality. Of disease mistaken for justice. Of punishment mistaken for morality. And yet, from places like this, change began. Reformers walked those corridors. Writers exposed the truth. Public opinion shifted. Slowly. Painfully. But it shifted. Newgate would eventually fall. Its stones removed. Its walls erased. But the question it leaves behind remains: how do we define justice? Is it fear? Is it suffering? Or is it fairness? The prison is gone. The echoes are not. And beneath the streets of modern London, the memory of Newgate still lingers. Not as a ghost story, but as a warning. Because history does not disappear. It waits. And it watches.